So you feel like you're in this battle with your body, and there's really nothing that within your control. So all we can do is educate ourselves and educate other people.
Privilege is all around you. It's useless until you recognize it. So it's time to stop feeling guilty and figure out how to use your privilege to make an impact. I'm Amber Cabral, and this is Guilty Privilege. Welcome to another episode of Guilty Privilege. My name is Amber Cabral, and today I've had the privilege of talking to Tanika Gray Valbrun. She is the founder of the White Dress Project, and she is also an award-winning journalist. So she has a passion for storytelling. And the stories that we're going to talk about today affect someone you know and maybe even you. And it's worth us leaning in to understand the value of the equity when it comes to women's reproductive health and how we can advocate for ourselves. Thank you for joining me, Tanika.
Thank you so much for having me, Amber. And thank you for shining a light on this topic. It's your personal story, it's my personal story, and I'm so happy that we get to share today.
I feel like we're going to have a conversation about something that people don't talk about.
Yes.
And I feel like you do talk about it. And I think that the fact that you are willing and I am willing should make for a very valuable dialogue. Let's first start out by you just giving me a quick snapshot into your project, the White Dress Project. I'd like you to talk about that. You also work at CNN as a content producer, and I'm sure that that's lovely.
Yeah.
But I'd like to focus, most of our conversation will touch on CNN, but I really want to hear about the White Dress Project. So can you tell us what that is and how it got started?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to talk to you. I feel like, you meet people on social media and you meet people through friends. And then when you meet in person, you're like thrilled when their energy is the same, when they're just as beautiful. So I really appreciate you having these conversations and having me. I'm so glad to talk about the White Dress Project because it really is my baby. I feel like it is what is my purpose. I feel like it is what I'm here to do, which is advocate for people who are managing life with fibroids and managing life with reproductive health issues. As you so eloquently said, it really can take us on a journey.
Yeah.
And I think when we put ourselves in spaces where women like us, who are career women, who are social women, have a lot of things going on, and we can also find the importance in sharing our stories. This very difficult story to share, I think it's so important. So the White Dress Project was started in 2014. I'm so thrilled that this is going to be our 10th year anniversary.
That's 10 years.
Honey, I am so happy because it was birthed from just my own personal story. I was suffering with uterine fibroids from probably around the age of 15 or so, and really, really heavy periods, always bloated. I was always that girl that, had an extra backpack because I had to have my things with me, right? All my pads, my leggings, extra pair of underwear. So I realized that was just like a way of life for me. Fast forward to getting married, going through school, all of those things. I was just still managing life with fibroids. And I felt like it was normal. I felt like this is just a plight of a woman. I felt like my mother told me that this is how it goes. She had fibroids. And I was like, it is what it is, right? I guess this is
I just got to deal with it.
Exactly. The cards that I've been dealt.
Yeah.
And I really figured out that no, this is a part of my story. My story deserves to be told. And if I'm going through this, what is Amber going through?
Exactly.
Right? Like, what are other people going through? What are other women in my circle going through? I can't be the only one that's canceling on a Friday night because my period is out of control.
Exactly.
So I decided to start this organization after my first myomectomy when I had 27 fibroids removed. Oof. And yeah, girl, it was that sentiment exactly. Just hard, devastating. Didn't know how many had
the information is a mess.
Right.
So you don't really know. Like
you don't. So you're not only getting a diagnosis, but then you're like, how I have so many, and then you're like, why ain't nobody tell me before?
Right. And a lot of times, what they tell you in terms of how many they tell you is different than what they actually find when they go in. Yeah, that's yes.
So once you actually do the testing, or actually have the surgery, then the number usually doubles.
Yes,
and that happens in so many cases. I rarely hear, oh, I had 9 and they took out 9.
9, yes.
No,
it doesn't happen
18,
that way.
Yes, 22,
exactly.
24.
Yes.
So I really started the organization for myself.
Mm.
I wanted the support for myself. I didn't understand why there were no walks, runs.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was asking me for money. There was no national campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And people really didn't deem fibroids as a public health issue.
Correct.
And I was just like, not feeling it.
Yeah.
And I want to share my story because I understand, being a journalist, the power of sharing your story.
Our friend Giannis connected us.
Yes.
Right. And so she's also
Love
a guest
Giannis.
on the podcast. She's magnetic. So we were probably bound to meet in some way. But
she is.
When we met, we ended up having a conversation because I was in the process of really realizing that like something was gonna have to be done.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it to her. I wasn't afraid to talk about it. And I was also very shocked by how few people were talking about it. Right. Because I'm like, you do see all the data that says that there are a lot of women that have fibroids. There are a lot of Black women.
Yes.
But what you're not getting
90% of Black
literally,
women.
But you're not getting the conversations around it, how they were discovered, how they're impacting them. Like you do hear heavy periods, but you're not really understanding like the degree to which there's like life changing happening.
Exactly.
And so I felt like, because I didn't necessarily have some of those things until later.
Yeah.
I honestly, when I went in to see a doctor and I was told I had fibroids when I was probably 26.
Mm-hmm.
But they were like, oh, they're tiny. It's nothing. It's,
we can watch and wait.
Yeah, we'll watch. No big deal. No explanation about what they even were.
Mm-hmm.
I was also busy, so I didn't dig into it.
You're a career woman.
If someone had just told me that watch and wait meant if your periods get heavier, if, like, what am I watching for? I never got any of that information.
And the thing about watching and waiting is that a fibroid's job is to grow.
To grow.
So if we know this information and we know that
why are we waiting? What are we watching for? It to do what it's supposed to do? Yeah,
exactly.
So yes, exactly. So fast forward, last year I ended up, I went into one doctor's office with the intention of saying, okay, I know I have fibroids. I, just want to know what my options are. Mm-hmm. And the immediate solution was, you have to have a hysterectomy. And I was like, what? Well, I do not want children. And so I can appreciate that. But also, no, this is an organ in my body. I don't know that I would like for you to take it out.
Right.
So can you just take out the thing that is the problem? That seems like it would be the right step. Well, if we do that, it's, we're going to miss some. And so then we'll have to go back, or they grow back, or there was just all of this excuse for why I had to have a hysterectomy.
Right.
So I was really put off by that, left the doctor's office, ended up getting referred somewhere else, went to another doctor's office. Oh, I also was told that my hysterectomy I had to have like the hip to hip kind of cut. And I was like, yeah, that's out of the question. That was really the thing that made me go look. I ended up going to another doctor, and the second doctor, almost similar experience. I also was really concerned because I had only had an ultrasound, and you can't see on an ultrasound. Like it's not, because ultrasound is like it's relying on movement, which is why you can see babies so well on an ultrasound. Absolutely. But like fibroids don't swim, they're just sitting. Don't. So I'm like, you can't even see them well.
Exactly. And I just want to make a point about testing and imaging here.
Yeah.
Always ask for MRI.
And I did. And so I did not know that, but I have been literally telling people that since I had my experience, because I was told I had 2. You have 2. One is in an inconvenient place. That's what's probably bothering you. Let's go ahead and just, give you a hysterectomy. Then you don't have to worry about them ever, especially since you don't want kids. I'm like, so I have 2 things and you want to take my whole situation? Like, I was like, that doesn't make sense. So I went to a third doctor. When I got to the third doctor and I explained to her what was going on, and she asked me about a few other symptoms I was having, I didn't even realize my period was heavy, because we don't really talk about, we're just starting to see information about what a heavy period looks like. So I didn't know it was wrong. And not to mention, everybody had one. So to me, I'm having a normal thing.
Yeah.
She was the one that was like, yeah, let's have an MRI. When I saw the images from the MRI, I was like, I can't believe people are getting surgery of any kind without having something that gives them this perspective.
Exactly.
And most people don't get an MRI.
It's happening so
Blew
often.
My mind.
Yeah. It's sad.
It's
heartbreaking.
And it's hurtful. I hope you're enjoying today's episode. And if you happen to also be looking for tools to help you navigate tough conversations, to be able to show up as a more impactful ally, or just to have resources about how to navigate equity in your world. I've written 2 books. My first book is called Allies and Advocates. And this book is really focused on helping you show up as a more impactful ally. It has actual tactics and tips and things that you can practice to help you get there, both for yourself and for others. My second book is called Say More About That. Now, Say More About That is more about helping you to speak up, to push back, to challenge, to be able to have those conversations that sometimes get a little bit difficult. And in fact, I've given you actual scripts to help you to be able to do that. So if you're interested in just having a few extra resources in your pocket to be able to help you to navigate any of those things, you can go pick up those books anywhere where you buy books, or you can pop down into the show notes and click the links and buy them there. Back to the episode.
And think about you, Amber. You have the resources. You have the privilege to do it, right? You have the PTO days, whatever is needed. Think about all of those women who don't have those things, right? And look at this person in the white coat with this level of authority.
Exactly.
And they say, well, my doctor told me.
Exactly.
And then that becomes their only choice.
Exactly.
Right? So you and I had the liberty to go to 3-4 doctors and make an informed decision.
And find someone that we were comfortable with.
Exactly.
A lot of people don't have that.
No.
A lot of folks don't have that. And I'll be also very candid. My doctors were all Black.
Mm-hmm.
All of the doctors I went, they were here in Atlanta. They were all Black.
Mm-hmm.
And so, people were like, oh, you need to make sure you go to a Black doctor. I'm like, yeah, this is bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's the Black doctors are also a part of some of the things that are happening that are really dangerous to me. Absolutely. And so I ultimately ended up finding, and I'm so glad that I had an MRI, because they discovered I had something called adenomyosis, which means that my uterus will just continue to grow.
Yeah.
When my uterus came out, it was the size of a 4-month pregnant uterus. It needed to go.
Yeah.
I ended up having to have a hysterectomy anyway, but I was able to have a laparoscopic hysterectomy, which is for me much better, right?
And it was your choice.
And it was my choice, and I was making an informed decision.
Yes,
it wasn't like, oh, there are these 2 kind of blurry things on this picture.
Right.
We should just take it because you don't want kids. And I'm like, wait, like I'm not even okay with that. So, Giannis and I kind of had some conversation beforehand, and then she had mentioned you to me then. And so when the second season of the podcast came around, I was like, oh, I should absolutely ask her to do this, because it's like, I do think that there are starting to be conversations, but I shared my story on Instagram. Mm-hmm. The number of women who reached out to me privately and were scared to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know if it's generational. I don't know if it's like, I don't know if it's a combination of like cultural.
I think it's all of those things. I think I can just speak for myself. As a Jamaican woman, my mother always taught me, like, you don't talk about issues below the belt. Like, you're not, if you do so, you're not deemed classy. You're not a sophisticated woman. And of course, darling, you want to be a sophisticated woman.
Right.
Like, I raised you to be a sophisticated woman. So I think a lot of that happens where we are just taught, if we want any level of dignity, integrity, class, it's just not something we talk about. And I think that is so unfortunate, because it limits us, and it almost makes us really traumatized about our own body, right? So then you feel like your body is selling you out.
I felt like my body was selling me out.
Oh yeah.
I could not put on clothes. I could not understand. I don't eat enough to be getting bigger.
Right.
But my body was like operating like I was pregnant,
Yeah.
So I'm like, why? I don't know why I can't fit clothes. I am drinking water. I'm doing the working out. I am trying. What's happening? It literally felt like I was being betrayed. I had gotten to a point where I decided I just wasn't going to beat myself up about it, but I was not okay. Like, I wasn't comfortable at all.
Imagine that entire mental health process that happens, deterioration that happens, right? Because you start to tell yourself, am I not doing enough? It's kind of like what happens, when a woman has a miscarriage. It's always like, what was it that I could have done differently? So you feel like you're in this battle with your body, and there's really nothing that is within your control. So all we can do is educate ourselves and educate other people about the fact that we do have a process in this. We are a part of this, right?
You get to push back. You get to ask questions. You get to, that was the biggest thing that I feel like I walked away with, is that I'm unrelenting about understanding what is happening to my body.
Absolutely.
But a lot of women are not. Like a lot of women feel like once I'm in this room with this doctor, I have to do what they say and that's it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
It's the white coat syndrome.
It is.
Like we feel like they are the authority. They went to medical school, 4 years of residency. They know. But I always say, Amber, that we are the CEOs of our body.
Absolutely.
Right? At the end of the day, you can't tell me how my period went down. Now, I may not be able to explain it in scientific terms.
Right.
But I know that on the 3rd week, when my ovaries start to burn on my left side, I know my period's coming.
Exactly.
Like, you know, those anecdotal things about your body that we need to be proud about sharing. And that's why I'm so big on storytelling, because I believe that storytelling has so many data points in it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I think we need to start to revere those data points just as much as we do scientific ones, because within our stories, there's so much data that can be garnered. And I think we need to share those with our doctor and almost force them to listen.
I think that has to be part of it, for sure.
That has to be what I
feel like one of the
changes.
things I wish and I tried to do this through like just sharing my story. Yeah. One of the things I wish I could have done immediately after was almost give people a guidebook of questions to ask, like, no matter what these things. And if you are uncomfortable with the answers, you should find another doctor. Yeah. Because it was so easy for like, I mean, I haven't even had a speculum put into my body in this office and y'all are talking about a hysterectomy. I'm confused.
It's crazy.
How are we here?
It's crazy.
And so like, how often is that happening to someone else? And like, what was it? Like, it's like the second most common surgery or something.
Yes.
In addition to it being the second most common surgery. Yeah. And then it's also one of the things that people will say, basically what I remember learning was, it was something along the lines of, if you don't have a C-section, you are likely, like if you don't have children, and if you also have never had a C-section, this is probably the surgery that you will have. Like in a lifetime as a woman, this is the surgery that you have if you haven't had either a child or a C-section.
I think we so greatly need to change that narrative.
Absolutely.
Because there is so much more to our uterus than bearing children.
Correct.
And there's this study that just recently came out from, I believe it was Arizona State University, that talks about the connection between your uterus and your brain.
Oh, wow.
Right? And that there is significant cognitive, pardon me, I'm no doctor, right? So I'm going to send the study to you, but there's some decline that happens cognitively when you remove your uterus, i.e. dementia.
Wow.
And the article talks about how many of our grandmothers we know that had the surgery, right? And then now are suffering with some form of dementia. So there is a connection that happens, because if we can believe and understand that when we're getting our periods, we get an attitude, right? Or we get in a mood, or something with our mental health can happen. Yeah. And we all believe that. Yeah. We know that. We see it. We feel it. We know when it's coming. So if we can believe that, then there has to be some truth to the connection between our uterus and our brain and what's happening in our minds. Right. And I just don't think we explore that enough. So it breaks my heart when I hear you say that someone said to me, because I didn't want to be a mother, because...
Oh, it was the immediate solution.
You're right. And that's so heartbreaking to me.
Immediate. There was no second guess. Oh, you don't want kids? Oh, yeah, we can eliminate this altogether. Right. I had to advocate initially to make it clear that I also wanted to be sure that we were keeping my ovaries. Yeah. I had to have my doctor modify the documents they have you sign, because there's a document that says that if we see something wrong with your ovaries, we will take them. And I was like, no. No, let me see and let me have a consult about that as well. Like, I do not want you to just make a decision while I'm under anesthesia because I've previously signed this piece of paper. Like, this is not the way I want it to go.
And Amber, that's a gem right there. That's like a life hack right there.
Don't do it.
Pro tip.
Don't do it.
Like, make sure you can alter these documents, right?
And they hand all this stuff to you and make it seem like you cannot. You absolutely can say, and no, I do not want that.
Exactly.
I do not want that.
I mean, if people get nothing else from this, please alter your documents if you feel necessary.
Yeah, you can ask for that. Yes. I mean, it is so so many people did not know that they could ask for things. And that's the thing I got from when I shared my story. And I asked for everything. I kept pressing. I walked out of doctor's offices because I was just like, yep, nope, don't sound right. I'm going to go find someone else. Hey there. I hope you're enjoying the episode. And in fact, if you are, you can bring me to your organization or event to help you bring conversations like this to life in your workspaces. This is something I do for a living. I do coaching, I do training, I do executive consulting, whatever it is that you might need as it relates to trying to figure out how to activate allyship or equity in your space. It's probably something I can support. So if you're interested in how we can work together, you can reach out to me at cabralco.com or pop down into the show notes and click the link, book a discovery call, and we will chat with you soon. Back to the show. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that the White Dress Project has accomplished. Yes. I know that there have been some great things in this last 10 years. Can you share some of the wins, some of the bright spots that have come out of the White Dress Project?
Oh, I'm so proud of this because there's so many wins that have come out of what we've created, what I did when I stepped out on faith and decided to share my story. I think what is so important about the White Dress Project and why I'm so proud of it is because one of the biggest things that we have done is create community. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important to have community in these spaces because you really want to feel like you're not alone.
Yes.
That's what I was feeling, why I created it. Because I was like, I can't be the only one in fetal position on the bathroom floor on a Friday night when everybody else is out, summer white parties, like all the things, and I'm not participating. So I wanted to create community. I wanted people to understand that they could advocate for themselves, that they were the CEOs of their bodies, that they could ask important questions, that they could change documents.
Exactly.
And not feel so stifled by what the medical community often makes us feel like, which is, I'm the authority. Like, what do you like? You know, I really don't even have time to take your questions. Like, that's a whole nother podcast talking about, you know, just the experiences we have. So creating community. I'm so very proud of that. We are very active on social media and just a large community. Right. The second thing I'm so proud of is our creation of July as Fibroid Awareness Month. Yes. And I remember sitting at my kitchen table and saying, I want a month. I want something where people can rally around a month and say, this is our month. Our stories are hard to share. They're hard to tell, but something that can bring us together as a community. So I wrote the legislation and first presented it to the Georgia State House and had to testify and basically defend why I felt like this was important. And the resolution passed.
That's amazing.
Thank you. And I have gone on to do that in the U.S. House, and that is how July has been declared Fibroid Awareness Month.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So we're really excited about that because not that this is something that you always feel celebratory about, but our organization is really meant to allow people to understand that they don't have to suffer alone. So when you don't feel like wearing your white dress, I'm wearing my white dress for you, or white clothing. Right. It really goes far beyond white dresses. Yes. It's really just a symbol of hope that says, I got you, sis. I understand what you're going through. We will get through this. We will advocate for funding and more research. Women's health research in this country, let's not even begin to get started on the low percentile of funding. Right. And then when you think about Black women and what we're getting, it's horrendous. Right. So I just wanted a space, and I want to do whatever I can do to make sure that those stories are being told in the reproductive health space. Maternal mortality is really having a moment right now, and I'm so happy for it. Same. But I think we need to pour fibroids into there. We need to pour PCOS, endometriosis, all of that in there, because a lot of times the same pregnancy complications are with women who are suffering with
connected to all of that.
It's
absolutely
all connected.
Yeah, that adenomyosis, going back to that diagnosis, I had never heard of that. Yeah. I had no idea what it was. So when she said that to me, she was like, oh, it's kind of rare. Yeah. And like, I went to go look it up. I could not find anything. You know what I mean? Because you get your report before you they talk to you about it. And I was just like, wow, I'm just like walking around with this thing, and I can't even find any information that I understand about it. Like all of it is
Gabrielle,
in legalese.
Right. Legalese and
like,
scientese.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I have no idea what this is.
Exactly. I remember Gabrielle Union, I think, was like the first celebrity influencer to talk about it. And she talked about, you know, the reason for her multiple miscarriages was due to it. I just had surgery August 31st of this year, of 2023. And they found adenomyosis. I had another 13 fibroids removed. This is my third myomectomy.
Wow.
Still have the greatest desire to be a mother. And when I think of all of that, 27, I had 5 my second one, 13 this one, adenomyosis. And just a few weeks ago, Amber, I went back to the doctor and they're like, something's in your uterus. And I was like, what? After I'm barely recovered.
Right. Like, what do you mean? I'm like right on the line.
Exactly. And there's some type of polyp there. And while they seem to feel very cavalier about it, oh, Tanika, you know, it's fine. We can remove a polyp easily. For me, it's another thing. Right? So I understand when you just get to the point where you're like, okay, what else can I take? And on top of that, the years of anemia. I've had 7 blood transfusions due to uterine fibroids because of the way they feed on my blood in my body. So I'm always ice girl, cold girl. I need a jacket. I want some socks on. I gotta pee. Like all of those symptoms that come along with that. So I really want to implore people that we really need to share our stories and we really need to advocate, because it's not just about having a benign tumor in your uterus, right? There's so many other things that come along with it.
That leads me to a couple questions I would love your perspective on. The first is I would love to just kind of get your thoughts about like just the idea that we approach this as a mild thing because they're benign. I feel a way about it. I'm just like, but it's not supposed to be there.
Right.
So why don't we know why they're happening?
Like, so the benign is irrelevant.
Exactly. It's growing in my body and it's not supposed to be. Right. And I just always say, like, if men had something growing in their testicles that wasn't supposed to be there, I feel like it would be there would be an ad every third commercial segment talking about it. So I'm like, why did I have to discover this thing like as though it's a covert mission? Why aren't there meaningful discussions about it? I'd love to just kind of hear your perspective about, just how you think the medical community in general handles fibroids. And then I would like to tap back into just that racial element. Like, I have some strong opinions there as well, but given your experience and the things that you've probably learned leading the White Dress Project, I'd like to hear your thoughts there too.
Yeah, so I think there's just so much medical bias. I think there's all the things that we know, right? The gaslighting that Black women go through. I'll start just on a grand level of just women's health, right? It's just underfunded, underserved. When you think of the amount of money that a woman spends versus the amount of money that our government agencies put into funding any scientific research, the math is just not mathing with it, right? It's just not adding up regarding how all of this plays out in our population, right? So I'm always calling fibroids and PCOS and endometriosis a public health issue because it is, right?
It is.
Because we're not talking about it enough. We're not, it's always an afterthought. I feel like physicians, while I'm not against physicians at all, they are very cavalier about
Dismissive,
Dismissive, cavalier. There's so many women that are going through this. Is that supposed to make me feel like
it's chronic? So that sounds like we should be concerned.
That sounds
y'all
like
flipped out about COVID,
right?
So like, if half the population is why is this also not a flip out moment, right?
Exactly. Why are we not alarmed and gaveling on tables?
Right. Like where are these coming from? We don't have answers at all.
And then on top of that, what is it going to take for us to get there? right? Like what is going to be the changing of the narrative that gets us there?
Mm-hmm.
I feel that, it's our historical context as well, how we feel that Black women handle pain,
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that we know about Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks,
Mm-hmm.
all of those things cannot be forgotten, and they're
Right.
not swept away, and they're not being dismissed enough. There's
Mm-hmm.
not enough call out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we talk about it in moments when we're afforded the opportunity to insert it into the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but really not examining how it has had an impact and how that impact has trickled down into our medical communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's still happening in our medical schools, which is why I have the mission to talk to our medical students and our residents more about this, because you're not even learning about this in medical school.
No.
So, and I even feel like our pediatricians need to know.
Yeah, I think that it should be a broader conversation. Like, it's something that everyone's going to encounter.
Yeah.
Because it's so prevalent. If you're going to have conversations with, young people about sex and reproductive health, why isn't it a part of the conversation? Why wouldn't it be a thing that you would add to that discussion? Because everyone either is going to deal with it personally or know someone.
Exactly.
Because it blew my mind when I started to talk about it. And people literally, I cannot imagine what the White Dress Project's feed looks like.
Yeah.
Because I was overwhelmed for a week and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I mean, I was, when I shared, I was in my recovery period. You can't do much, anyway. So, I mean, I was on my phone tinkering around, but I was so angry. I was so angry just at how I was handled, how so many people, like me were handled. How many people were literally told their only option was a hysterectomy? Mm-hmm. I mean, I fortunately got to a doctor where I was able to option. She literally said to me, this, adenomyosis is going to continue to cause your uterus to grow, but if you don't want to have hysterectomy, you do not have to. And so but I didn't get that energy from more than one doctor before that, so
and that's all we ever want.
I want to know my options for real.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to know that the part that really, really knocked my socks off, the point where I was just like, absolutely not. I had the ultrasound in an office. They took some pictures. I had not this office. Let me find another doctor's office. I go to the first doctor that I, really am like, okay, let's see what we can do about this. I go and they ask me to send them the ultrasound pictures. I try to send them. The emails don't work. I print them out. I literally take them in and they were like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, I can't see nothing. I didn't print this on any special medical paper. What are you looking at?
Right.
And so just the comfort level of making a decision with an image that has been printed on my at-home HP, right? Nothing high res, no, special that does not appear to be the kind of quality that you should be making decisions about my body with.
Absolutely.
But that was what would have happened.
And it happens every day.
Yeah. And I'm just like, okay. And so I was so angry at the stories of women who had that happen.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, nobody asked for that. My consistent message was exactly what you said. Ask for an MRI.
Yeah.
Because they can't see.
Yeah.
They really can't see. And if they can't see and explain it, why should they be going in looking for it?
Key point.
But it's happening.
It's very much happening. I always say, finding a good doctor is like dating, right?
It is.
You're not on what I'm on, then you may not be the person for me. Mm-hmm. And I think we really need to value ourselves that way. Yes. And really need to honor what we know about our bodies. I just don't think we're doing that enough, because we've also had the narrative my body is not mine. It's out of control. I don't know what it's doing. Yep. I don't know. And we also have to take that back too. No, our bodies are ours. Right. And we do know what's happening.
And you have agency.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to ask you, I imagine that you probably went on a bit of a journey to start, a project that advocates for a public health issue. Are there any recommendations you have for people that want to do that? There are a lot of Black women causes that I think could use a lot of the energy that you put behind, the White Dress Project. Do you have any recommendations that having done this, and I mean, getting a month, is a big deal. Is there anything that you would recommend people keep in mind to kind of bring that to life?
I feel like just be authentic. Mm-hmm. I literally was like, all right, my mom is going to be mad that I'm about to share my story.
Yeah.
But I did. And
Right.
to your point earlier about how your DMs blew up, like, I feel like that's the moment when people understand, like, oh my God, Amber just shared, like, okay, I'm good.
That is a thing. You're right.
It's such a thing, Amber, because I remember the same thing happened to me when I shared. It was like, oh my God, girl, my mom, my cousin, my sister.
Yes.
And it's like, I've known you for 15 years
I had no idea,
and never knew.
Yeah. That's
so
true.
I think the moment you share, it gives people just the encouragement and authority, and just it ignites their voice, right? And I think as women, that's what we're here to do. We're here to, it's more than being my sister's keeper. Like, I want your voice to be told too. So to answer that question, I feel like just be authentic. There are people and there are moments that are going to come up where people are going to be like, oh, Tanika, it's not cancer. I remember the first time.
I can't believe somebody would say that, honestly.
Man, all the time. I remember the first time I went to the U.S. House of Representatives, and a senator or House representative said to me, Tanika, well, is anyone dying from fibroids? And I remember looking at him and saying, like, sir, with all due respect, dying shouldn't be the standard.
Is that the requirement?
Let me know something.
And let's be very honest about that for just a moment. If we consider the framing of a lot of legislation that's taking place today,
right,
and we consider some positioning around a lot of that legislation, it could be inferred that the inability to reproduce or something that presents an obstacle to that should be a concern.
Absolutely.
And so potentially a concern that should be legislated over.
Absolutely.
If we look at what's happening in that space now, how would this not also meet the qualifications of something that should be a concern? Because it is preventing the opportunity for a life, which lots of folks are very preoccupied with that exact topic.
Exactly.
So, I mean,
so well said.
I would have probably been blown away,
and I was. So I say that to say that you will meet those obstacles. You will meet the people in power, right?
Yeah.
That you're trying to get to, that you're trying to advocate to, that you're trying to show that how important this is. And they will say things that really rock you. But you have to keep going. I really also want us to know that there's such value in our story. Like, I keep saying the same thing.
I also think that part of your passion around that too is because you're a journalist. You work in a newsroom. You probably have visibility to why storytelling can shift the narrative. I would love for you to touch on that. And then I have one last question.
Okay. Yeah, I'm so proud to be a journalist. I work for a great network that we share stories, right? And we do what we can to get stories of underserved people and people who wouldn't otherwise have their story be told, right? But do we always get that right? That could be argued. But I understand the power of the story because I see what can happen when someone's story does make it to television, or when someone does have the ability to create community after they've told their story. So I always say that because I feel like it's a powerful moment that we always need to be reminded of. Because let's be clear, all of us have one, right?
Right.
And there are times when we don't feel that our story rises to the level of others because we compare. We feel like, well, I didn't have 27 fibroids. I only had 9. So maybe my story. And I think we need to dismiss that thought. Because what it does is it stifles us, and it says that
it has to be absolutely terrible for it to even matter.
Exactly.
And that's not the case.
And that's not the case because it has somehow altered your life.
Right.
And it has altered the dreams that you had for yourself. When I was growing up, I always wanted to be a mother. Like, marriage was cool, but it was my greatest desire to be a mother. So to see the trajectory that I've had, to see my journey, it's really a heartbreaking moment for me to understand where I am, the age that I am, and realizing that dream has not been realized yet. I'm still very hopeful that it will be realized. But for me, people will say, girl, you don't want no kids, no way, right? Or all the things that
nobody can tell you what you want.
Exactly.
You get to want what you want.
Exactly. And I feel that same sentiment about your story. Nobody can tell you the importance of your story, and nobody's going to necessarily validate you about your story, but someone will resonate with your story. And I think that's the most important thing that I've done in starting a movement, which it is a movement, and I'm very proud of that, is being authentic about my story and understanding that my story and my voice matter.
I love that. Okay, I have one last question.
Yes.
I asked this question.
God, we're done.
I know, it was fast, right? It goes fast. It goes so fast. So I have one last question. My question is something I ask every single guest, and I'll give you a little bit of a primer. So I started this podcast. It's called Guilty Privilege because I think that people need to understand that privilege isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like we tend to think of privilege as something that, you know, only the elite have. We also, if we happen to have some variation of privilege, tend to be a little bit shy about it or uncomfortable or embarrassed or we, you know, defensive even. And really privilege gives us a lot of opportunity to create opportunity, access, equity for others. And so I call the podcast Guilty Privilege because I think people need to stop being guilty about it. So my question is, what is one privilege that you have that you refuse to feel guilty about?
I think you said it so eloquently when you talked about sharing your story and advocating for yourself through your fibroid journey. And I feel very proud and privileged about the fact that I have opportunities like this with you to share my story. Because I feel like my story, it's going to help somebody. Like I don't have any thoughts about it not. Like this is going to help somebody.
Right.
Somebody is going to hear this and it's going to resonate with them. So I feel very privileged to be sitting on this couch with you, to be talking with legislators, to be with community people who are like, I want to share my story. Like when I hear that, I'm like, yes, that's the sauce right there.
Right.
That's what we want. We want people to get to the point where they understand how important it is.
Yeah.
Now, do people always feel safe doing that?
Yeah, of course not.
No. Have we traumatized women about sharing stories and about feeling like a woman and what they can share?
Right.
Absolutely. So I feel very privileged that I've gotten rid of all of that. I stand very firm in knowing who I am and my story. Yeah. So I feel like that's a privilege that I'm not going to be guilty about.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you for coming. This was great.
Yes, this is so good.
My name is Amber Cabral, and this is Guilty Privilege.